Bridget Rushak for the defense. May I proceed? Please state your name for the court, spelling your last name for the record.
My name is Julia Lorian. That's Lorean.
What do you do for a living?
I work for my own company, Greylord Strategies. We do auditing for police departments at the federal, state, and local levels, particularly on undercover investigation protocol.
What is your professional background?
I worked for the FBI for 25 years investigating white-collar crime. And while I was with the Bureau, I personally worked on hundreds of undercover investigations, in addition to doing a lot of work to help implement the Attorney General's undercover guidelines.
What education do you have?
I received a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and statistics from Johns Hopkins University, and then I went to law school at the University of Virginia, and later received a Master of Laws from Harvard.
Ms. Lorian, how are you involved in today's case?
My company, Greylord Strategies, was asked to investigate the procedures used by the Midland State Police Department in their investigation of Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington.
What information did you have to conduct your investigation?
I had affidavits and email communication and recorded conversations.
Once you had that information, how did you go about your investigation?
Using my years of federal experience, I compared the investigative procedures used by the MSPD to the Attorney General's undercover guidelines, which have become the standard for undercover investigations nationwide.
Did you reliably apply those methods to the information you had?
Yes, of course.
Ms. Lorian, why are there undercover guidelines?
Well, because undercover investigations are a dangerous business. Even if they're conducted perfectly, they still carry risks to people's safety and property, or risks that an officer may inadvertently commit a crime while undercover, or induce someone to commit a crime.
What can happen if an officer fails to follow these undercover guidelines?
Well, the guidelines are all based on what we know minimizes the risks that come along with an undercover investigation. So if an officer fails to follow the guidelines, he or she significantly increases those risks.
Did the Bancroft Covington operation follow all of those undercover guidelines?
No, it did not. Specifically, they failed to get adequate authorization for the operation and failed to adequately document or train their officers, specifically Mickey Keenan.
Let's talk about those one at a time. What do you mean there wasn't adequate authorization?
Well, the operation needed to be authorized by the Polk County District Attorney before any kind of action was taken, and that didn't happen.
What can happen if an investigation isn't properly authorized?
The major problem with lack of authorization is that it means lack of oversight. There was no one checking up on this investigation to ensure that the officers weren't becoming biased and weren't violating the undercover guidelines and that everything was going according to procedure.
I'd like to move on to that second point you mentioned. What was wrong with the training of the officers?
I found a total lack of documented training for Mickey Keenan, who was the officer on the case.
Why did Mickey Keenan need to be properly trained?
Well, an officer without documented training is far more likely to allow his or her biases to influence the investigation, which in turn increases the risk that he or she will induce a crime or endanger others, or himself.
What does it mean to induce a crime?
Inducement occurs when an agent of the government causes a crime to occur that otherwise would not have happened.
Are there any concerns of potential inducement for today's case?
Yes. One of the things that raised the most concerns for me about inducement in this case was an email that I reviewed that was sent from the Chief of Police, Francis Kimball, to Officer Mickey Keenan.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been previously marked as Defense Exhibit A for identification purposes. May I approach the witness with that same document?
Mm-hmm.
I've just handed you Defense Exhibit A. Can you tell us what that is?
This is a copy of the email that I reviewed from the Chief of Police to Mickey Keenan.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of that email?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, defense moves Exhibit A into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor, to this hearsay. This email is an out-of-court statement trying to be used for the truth of the matter asserted. Now, this hearsay does have an exception under Richards v. Mississippi Barbecue that it must relate back to the conclusion. I would ask that this document be stricken from the record unless it relates back to the expert's conclusion.
Your Honor, according to Rule 703, experts are allowed to include otherwise inadmissible evidence in their conclusions. Ms. Lorian has already laid the foundation that she used this to reach her conclusions for today's case, so it is admissible.
Your response?
My response is, I'm fine with the email, so long as it does relate back to the conclusion. If it veers off of the conclusion, then I will object to it again.
That's fine, if it veers off, you may object again.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Lorian, how did you use this document in your investigation?
I was looking at the instructions that Chief Kimball provided to Mickey Keenan. I can show you in greater detail. I've brought a larger scale copy of this email in order to discuss the exact wording that Chief Kimball used.
Your Honor, may Ms. Lorian sit down to use the demonstrative?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that I'm able to move to see the...
Please do.
What are we looking at here, Ms. Lorian?
This is a copy of the email that I looked at from Chief Kimball to Mickey Keenan.
What parts of this email did you use in your investigation?
I was looking primarily at these 3 instructions that Chief Kimball provided to Mickey Keenan. I was concerned first about these 2, crack down on corruption and be newsworthy.
Why were you concerned about crack down on corruption and be newsworthy?
I'm concerned that those instructions may have created bias in Mickey Keenan. The instruction that the fact that the Chief of Police is targeting officers' investigations toward a certain kind of crime, corruption, and then instructing them to seek out specifically cases that are high profile enough to satisfy the Chief of Commissioners, the Chief of Police, is likely to have created some bias in the officers, including Mickey Keenan, who received this email.
What was concerning about this 3rd instruction here?
The 3rd instruction tells the officers to do whatever it takes to get a conviction. Now, where the first 2 instructions may have created bias, I'm concerned that the 3rd instruction encourages the officers to act on bias.
Thank you, Ms. Lorian. You may retake your seat. Did you want to say?
Yeah.
Ms. Lorian, did you look at any evidence to show that that bias might have affected Mickey Keenan?
Yes. From what I read in Mickey Keenan's affidavit, it appears that the majority of the initiative for the bribe plan came from Officer Keenan.
In your expert opinion, did the Midland State Police Department and Mickey Keenan conduct a reliable investigation?
No. They failed to get adequate authorization before they began the operation or after. They failed to either adequately train their officers or adequately document the training of their officers. And they failed to provide adequate instruction to their officers. This investigation was not in line with the undercover guidelines.
Thank you, Ms. Lorian. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Would you like me to take